All right, joining me now, he is a sports media columnist for the New York Post, and he's the co-host of the Marchand and Oren Sports Media Podcast. It is Andrew Marchand. Andrew, thank you for making the time. It's been quite the offseason in your world.
It has been the NFL TV free agent frenzy. I got a text. I was on top because of the Aikman stuff coming up and Al Michaels, but then it really kind of went into full gear, I guess, right after the Super Bowl when I got a text about Aikman and maybe Joe Buck going to ESPN. I got up from the dinner table. I said I gotta go, and I feel like it hasn't stopped since. So we're what now? We're in mid-May.
Yeah, it's been a crazy offseason, and I'll get into all of that. But people who don't know, I'm a media junkie. I've always loved following the sports media landscape. And as you said, these last few months have been just absolutely wild, and it really escalated to a whole new level last week when we got the Tom Brady news. And he gets this massive deal from Fox to eventually be their number one guy. How did all this kind of come into fruition? Because I know you did reporting and you mentioned his name early on in the process when he was retired, but then he came back to football, it kind of cooled off. And I always felt like he wasn't the media type of guy. I think he's on the record in an article that he's never going to do it. How did all this happen that he's going to Fox with a massive 10-year deal, $375 million that you reported on?
So when Aikman and Buck left, Fox kind of thinks of itself, and if you look at their roster, as going for Hall of Famers, the biggest names. And so Tom Brady did fit that billing. So I did mention him in articles. He did an article with Jason Gay of the Wall Street Journal, their great columnist, where he told Gay that he didn't want to be in the booth ever. So, but when he was retired, I'll put quotes on that, whatever that means. You know better than I do, Ari, what happened there. When he was retired, he was on the radar. Yeah, that's a possibility. When he came back to play, that kind of fell off my radar. Like Tom Brady's not an option. And I hadn't really thought he was a great option, even though when I look back to people I spoke to, someone was mentioning to me $25 million for Brady, and maybe he thinks about it at that number in terms of doing games. And that was, around I think it was right before the Super Bowl, right? Because he retired right
He
after
retired after his playoff loss 6 days later. That's when it was reported. Then 3 days after that, he made it official.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if I get my timeline right, then that was after that. Then maybe he'd consider it. And so Fox started to talk with him then, and it was kept very low. And they're kind of the circles that I run in and talk with people all the time. We're trying to figure out who is Fox going to get for their analysts. They kind of felt like it'd be Greg Olsen. They liked him. They've nurtured Greg Olsen to be an analyst and kind of foresaw him as maybe a potential number one, but he's only done 1 year. He was an all-pro, but not a Hall of Famer, so he didn't fit the billing. So they kept negotiating, got to the highest levels of Fox, and you start talking about the numbers that it got to in terms of 10 years, $375 million for an overall deal with Fox. It's hard to say no to that. The question is, when will Brady retire from playing? And when he does, will he have other options as well? So, but it's pretty good to have that kind of, no, you can, or I can do this. This is one option. Yeah, I've had this conversation a lot. Like, will he actually do it? We'll see. I don't know if I'm 100% that I'll even get to that, because I do think that Miami story is real. And he kind of has gone from one thing to another. So I'm not, and it doesn't seem like beforehand and even now after, it's like, wow, I can't wait to be in a booth. It's more like, well, you offered me all this money, I'll
Right.
do it. And it's good for Fox. It's good for everybody, because first off, if you're Fox and it does go through, you want to be in business with Tom Brady. That's the kind of the future of media. You look at what Peyton Manning's done, what LeBron's done, others, and so that's good for them. And then if let's say it doesn't happen, if you're Fox, you got a great bump of Tom Brady going to join Fox, and then maybe you do some other deal if he ends up never going into the booth.
Right. And the thing that I've been trying to figure out, there's a lot to digest there, but 37 million a year, there's also the ambassador role. What does that even mean? It's not 37 million just to call games. It sounds like there's more to this. Do we have any idea what that is?
Yeah, Fox has not explained what else he would do. If you look at what they have, I was at their upfront presentations this week. They made a big deal about Tubi. which is their streaming service. It's not a subscription service, it's an advertising-based service, and they're trying to grow that even more. And I've known for a while that they're excited about it. They think, they're zigging where everyone's zagging, asking for subscription money. They have Kevin Garnett involved in one project. Could I see Tom Brady involved in projects there? I wrote in my newsletter the other day, 2B12, I think has a nice ring to it. So that's a possibility. They also have been big into gambling with Fox Bet, FanDuel. When you look at what they've done with FanDuel and Fox Bet in the gambling space, I do think that maybe Brady could. I'm just speculating here. Brady could have some sort of spokesman role, in that. And would he really want that out there now as an active player? So maybe that comes to fruition after. So you start adding that up, and like the 375 kind of seems a little light, quite honestly, because he's Tom Brady, right? The number starts when you talk about the booth at 18, because that's where that's where Aikman and Romo are. So, and then you just go from there. And for him to go early with it, it had to keep escalating up and up. And also the idea that I don't think he necessarily really wanted to do this. And I think that's where you get to this agreement.
All right. So this is another thing that's interesting to me because you mentioned the Miami story, and there are some legs to that thing. The idea of him becoming a minority owner, is that still possibly on the table now? Like, could he leave this Fox deal eventually at some point? How does the contracts work in broadcasting? I'm not 100% sure how that works.
Well, I don't know the language in the deal, so I can't tell you 100%. But Tom Brady really had all the leverage, right? He's Tom Brady, so that's enough of the leverage. ESPN did have some interest, not at the level that Fox did, because they already have the Mannings, and they have Aikman and Buck, and they don't really have the anywhere to put him on games, which is really the focus. But I think if Tom Brady went to him and was like, I don't want to do this, they're not going to say, no, you have to be there every week for the next 10 years. I just don't foresee that happening. So it's an agreement. But if Tom Brady at some point said, no, I don't want to do it, I think he'd be able to get out of it. And it just seems as if, this, you do the football part, but he, retired, quotes, unretired, Bruce Arians, whatever it was there, was going to go to Miami. Obviously you guys in the NFL have reported on that. I have my own sources. That was 100% real. That was very well, I don't know if it would have happened because it had to be a trade and all that kind of stuff, but that was in play. So he possibly could have had ownership and been in the front office. Then this Fox thing, I don't think happens. And then, now he's going to be in the booth for 10 years. And so you kind of get the feeling that if he ever does retire from playing, he doesn't know exactly what he wants to do.
Interesting. And, you also brought up the Mannings. Peyton Manning especially is the name that was always brought up with broadcasting. And now he has the Alma Productions, and he's doing the Manning cast. And ownership in the Broncos is something that he's interested in. But did he ever kind of get an offer like a Brady package anywhere? Because he is always the ultimate name that was brought up, but he's kind of doing other stuff.
I think he does have a Brady package, right? So I think we don't know the exact number of his deal with ESPN, but I do think it's in the 20 million a year, plus 20 million plus a year range. And so when you look at that, he basically had a Brady deal, and now Brady's topped that and manning those contracts up in 4 years, I think. So, he'll be if it goes the way it's been going. And I think there are people at ESPN who think he's their most important personality that they have, Stephen A, whomever else you want to say, Buck and Aikman, that Peyton's the most important because he's been really important to ESPN Plus with his Peyton Places. That's very successful. And then the Manning cast really changed the perception in a lot of ways of Monday Night Football. And so he's important. So I think he already has his Brady deal. We just don't know the exact number.
Right. So Peyton is still going to be doing the Manning cast with Eli. But the difference this year is, of course, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman are now on the main telecast. Let me ask you this. When the season ended for Fox, were they anticipating a scenario where both are gone? And I guess when did ESPN start making that ultra aggressive push? Because they've been in on some big names and failed. When did that all happen as well?
So the feeling was, and where the negotiations were around the Super Bowl, Aikman would have gone to Amazon on Thursday nights and done games with Al Michaels. And then he would have done the doubleheader games. America's Game of the Week was what Fox calls it, in the afternoons on Sundays when it was a doubleheader, the big game with Joe Buck, and then the playoffs and the Super Bowl. That deal fell apart late, which it looked like it was going to be agreed upon, and everything, all this probably wouldn't have happened. Basically, maybe ESPN makes a big play for a Sean McVay or somebody else, but they wouldn't have gotten Aikman and Buck then. But then Aikman, they decided let's go for Aikman, and they were going to either pair him. They thought at one point they try to get Al Michaels, who might have gone back and returned to Monday Night Football. Then it became apparent Joe Buck had 1 year on his contract. Maybe you can get Aikman and Buck. Buck's 53 years old. Al Michaels is in his late 70s. So, and Buck and Aikman have been a team together for 20 years. You kind of have a proven commodity where ESPN has been very rocky in that main Monday night booth. And so that's when it turned. Fox had to let Buck out of his contract. They ended up doing that. And now for $165 million combined, Buck and Aikman will be your main Monday night booth for the next 5 years, leading into the ABC/ESPN Super Bowl in 2027.
Would you know when they allowed Buck and Aikman to go, were the Brady talks underway or were they kind of stuck on an island a little bit?
I think that I've heard mixed things, but they had Brady in mind. I'm not sure if they didn't know they were going to get him. I think they had him in mind. I've heard that maybe there was contact already before Buck left. Aikman left first, then Fox had to let Buck out of his contract. They could have just said, stay one more year. But I think in that scenario, they would have had to, they might have had a bridge year, or maybe where right. Steve Levy might have worked with Aikman waiting for Joe Buck. That would have been kind of awkward.
Yeah, interesting. So, looking at Fox now, it's kind of interesting because Kevin Burkhardt now takes over the #1 team. And me being from New York and being a Mets guy, it's pretty awesome to see him because he started off 8 years as a Mets field reporter. Is Greg Olsen the #1 guy this year? It sounds like that's likely, but is he like in a bit of an awkward situation right now where I'm doing #1, I'm doing a Super Bowl this year, but then I'm going to be demoted eventually back to #2, right?
Yes, but I think it's a great opportunity for Greg Olsen. If you're Greg Olsen, and I told you Fox's kind of attitude in terms of they like the legendary players, the Hall of Famers, you're always going to have someone looking over your shoulder. So if you don't do a great job, you're not going to have that job for long probably anyway. They're going to replace you with, if it's not Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Mike Tomlin, Sean McVay, one of these guys would come out and probably replace you if you don't do a good job. Now he knows Brady's kind of in the on-deck circle. And to me, you take that job. They offered him a raise already, but like if they offered you $1, you take that job because you're in the conversation, especially if you do a really good job. You're in the conversation with Brady, Romo, Aikman. These jobs, the top job pays super well, super visible. You're doing Super Bowls. Olsen had a chance to do 2 the next 3. And like we talked about earlier, I mean, do we know 100%? If I say, Ari, 100% Tom Brady is going to do this? Like, you can give me, what percentage would you put it at?
I would put it at least 1 year for sure. I'll put it about 85.
All right. So
to at least get started. To at least
1 year, 85 1 year. So again, all this stuff, these are elite athletes who've only advanced in football to the highest levels and have been the best like this. So they're not used to they're hyper competitive. And that means you have ego involved. And we all have ego involved in whatever we do, but they, even more so, you would think. And so you do, though, I think at some point, and this happens like in everyone's career, where you have to put your ego aside a little bit. You got to swallow it a little bit. And then it can work out if you're positive. And I think for Greg Olsen, this is a tremendous opportunity. Put your head down. You get along with Burkhardt. You guys have a year under your belt. Go hit a home run and make it so, wait, they're going to replace this guy? And NBC's deal is going to be up with Collinsworth in 4 years. Things change, and he's in his late 30s. So you have a long time. There's a long window for you to get in there and demand the big money. And which, if there wasn't a Brady already there, I just think it might not be as an ideal circumstance. So I think if Olsen can look past that, he'll be in good shape and it'd be a smart move. And if he doesn't do this, I think it would be a major mistake.
Interesting. So your vision is more of just get your foot in the door, show off what you can do, and see where it goes from here. And that kind of brings me to this next guy who you reported on Sunday, and that is Drew Brees. You report he's no longer with NBC after just 1 year. Doesn't sound like studio work is what he wants to do. I'm a bit of a believer that judging him off one playoff game is a bit unfair. What are his options? I mean, does he want to be a number two or number three guy? Is it what you just said? Just get your foot in the door, show what you can do, and eventually see where it goes. What do you think he does?
Number one, I agree with you. Okay. I don't think you could just focus on one game. I watched his Notre Dame games, and he did okay. It wasn't like terrible, wasn't amazing, but it was, well, there's potential there. And he's Drew Brees. So that's number one. If he wants to do games, he should take the Fox job. Because if you think about it, a year from now, there's a number one opening. You think Drew Brees is getting that job? No, he's not. His name is kind of associated with Jason Witten. He also kind of gets unfairly bludgeoned over 1 year in a terrible setup, etc. But if he go to Fox. If you want to do this, go to Fox, do the number two game, do well. You're still Drew Brees. Build up your ability as a broadcaster, and the same situation will be there. He's still in his mid 40s. And there's just not, that's like, if you look, okay, there's like 4 or 5 top jobs. He'd have 6 or 7. That's pretty good. And it puts you in position to do better games if this is what he likes to do, which he's already said publicly he does. I was told it a number of times. He was on with Dan Patrick around Thanksgiving of last year where he said that. So if I were him, if this is what he wants to do, that's what I would do. I would not, he sent out his tweet where he kind of said, well, I haven't decided yet what I'm going to do. He doesn't like studio. I don't see how that's not, turning back. And then doing Notre Dame without Mike Tirico and maybe like an inexperienced play-by-player like Jack Collinsworth. Again, if you don't want to have a broadcasting career, go do that, Drew. And if you want to do NFL games, that's not the way to get there. So to me, the obvious choice is Fox isn't going to pay him a lot. And he could get his ego. If it gets in the way and he says, I don't want to do it because you're paying Brady all this money, Romo gets all this money, Peyton, whatever. But if you want to do this, you'll build yourself up again, like you did from when you went from San Diego to New Orleans, and you might have a long broadcasting career. And it'll be impressive too, because it would be showing a little bit of swallowing your ego and doing the right thing. And he's made plenty of money.
And I think Brees would also be in that category of Hall of Famer superstar, which is what Fox is looking for,
100%.
which is what you mentioned before. So that decision is still waiting for. There's a different guy who I also want to bring up, and you mentioned it before as well, and that is Sean McVay. I don't think this was covered enough, but it sounds like the talks were fairly serious with Amazon. Al Michaels is, I believe, a close friend and neighbor with him. The money was real. How close was that to potentially happening there?
Well, it was close and it was not close, right? So Sean McVay made his comments around the Super Bowl. Jeremy Fowler from ESPN had a column where he mentioned a bunch of coaches who could go into broadcast, and McVay was in there. Those two things came together. Then this was an important element. He won the Super Bowl, right? So not only did he have like kind of the one accomplishment you want to have before you kind of step away for a little while, he made himself even more marketable. Because if you think about it, if you're Amazon, you have Al Michaels, greatest play-by-player of all time on the NFL, and then you have Sean McVay, who just won a Super Bowl. That'd be pretty good out of the gate if you're Amazon. So there was a meeting scheduled, I think at the Combine, and like the following week, but the Friday before is when he said he was staying that Friday night. Then I reported that they were prepared to offer him $20 million. I could get into all, there's a lot of, if you look at the behind the scenes people, they know, like there wasn't like, he knew what he could get, right? Yeah, he wasn't guessing, but he wanted to coach. It's pretty apparent that we're going to be talking, and I'm going to be writing about Sean McVay again in the future for some of these jobs. And I think he could go into the broadcast booth at some point for big money.
So you believe TV executives are still eyeing him down the road eventually? They believe he's going to eventually leave, similar to what maybe John Madden did back in the day.
He's basically said it. I don't think there's he said he doesn't want to be a lifer.
Yeah.
He wants to be there. He's getting married. He wants to be there if they presumably have children. And so also, if you're Sean McVay, right, he has a nice situation now with his quarterback, and we all, the NFL, the quarterback's the most important thing. So, but they did mortgage the future. So do you really want to stay around when the bill comes due? And they seem to be good with the salary cap. Again, not my expertise, but maybe they can, make it keep going with that, philosophy. But let's just say the bill comes due. That'd be a good time to leave. And so then you're out, right? I kind of joked that I want Sean McVay to sign up as a broadcaster, so then I can start writing about Sean McVay leaving for coaching. And he will be able to sit back, see if the Cowboy job or whatever job he really wants comes open when, let's say, Arch Manning lives up to the hype and he gets drafted #1 by the Jets when they just, flame out again with Zach Taylor or whatever. No, hopefully he's good, Zach Taylor. But anyways, wherever he wants to go, he'll be in prime position to be, I got $20 million or whatever he makes a year as a broadcaster, and then go coach. It's just, the world could be very well set up for Sean McVay. And so you can see how broadcasting, and then even his coaching career, if he could return to coaching, he'll be able to pick, and you would think if he does well these next couple of years, he might be able to pick that following job with the quarterback he wants, the situation he wants, the money he wants. It seems like it's pretty good to be Sean McVay right now.
No, absolutely. I mean, he's still 36. You mentioned the Super Bowl win. You mentioned that roster, having the quarterback under contract. You mentioned the fact that he is getting married, and he has mentioned this about, I mean, I think his comment was he doesn't want to be like a Bill Belichick, essentially, where I'm still doing this at 70.
Mm-hmm.
But he's the type of guy who I could see leaving when he's 40 and then doing broadcasting, which I think he'll be great at. And then if he wants to come back, the door will always be open for him. Speaking of coaches named Sean Payton is somebody who stepped away from a team who has mortgaged their future in a big way. It sounds like he's going to Fox in the studio, but was the interest there for him, or was there some concern that this is more of a one-year thing?
I do think the fact that it seems common knowledge that he could be the next Cowboy coach, or go back to coaching in some capacity in some place in the NFL, that doesn't help you, right? If you're especially on the games, you really want to bring in somebody from one of your top two teams that you think is going to leave in a year. And so, I mean, I always kind of have him pegged for that Fox studio from the beginning, with that pre-game show they have with Shager and Carissa Thompson and Michael Vick and company. And so at 11 o'clock on Sundays, and then kind of that Jimmy Johnson fill-in role. And so that kind of is, to me, an ideal position for him. First off, the exposure, number one. Number two, those guys, from what I understand, really have a great Sunday enjoying watching the games together. Just like they just love that aspect of it. And most of those crews do, the studio crews, hanging out together, kind of like that old locker room feel, and just enjoying watching the games and talking about them. And so he can get a sense of if he likes it. Fox can get a sense if he is good, and then maybe it grows from there. I mean, Jimmy Johnson's approaching 80, so he may retire at some point, and so could Peyton move in there permanently, and he might like that. I mean, that's a pretty good life. I mean, Jimmy Johnson will tell you that he was kind of one of those lifers.
Yeah.
And even when he was with the Dolphins and he missed his mother's funeral, I believe. And is that right? His grandmother?
I'm not 100% sure.
It was like a Monday night. It definitely like something to that vein. But I don't know if he missed that. Something happened where he coached the game on Monday night and he said he regretted it after. And, just kind of, there's another life out there. You don't have to be sleeping in your office and 24/7 football. You can have an actual life. And so, Peyton maybe will, find that he enjoys this. He doesn't want to go back to the sideline and the grind of that. It's an easier life. So this gives them the opportunity to do that on both sides. And so it makes a lot of sense. And though it's not official, I do believe that's happening.
Yep. And you are that Jimmy has, I know it's some of it is because of COVID, but he's been doing most of the shows from his own home studio as well over the last 2 years. Last one here before I wrap this up. One of the biggest questions that I'm always getting is about Sunday ticket. Are we getting any closer to finding a permanent home for that?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. At some point, yes, but I don't. As far as I know, I mean, we've kind of felt like maybe around the Super Bowl we might hear something. Here are the contenders: Apple, Amazon, Disney, and I think the dark horse. And again, this is not like, I don't definitely say this, but I do think the new kind of HBO Max, that Warner Discovery, because I think they do want to spend money. They're the ones, along with Apple, who don't really have a relationship in terms of games with the NFL. These contracts that they just signed are for a long time. Do you really want to go that long not having that NFL relationship? I was high on Apple getting it from what I was told, recently, and now I've heard maybe they're not. So I've kind of, I'm not a big, I don't really like to say they're in the lead, right? Because these
Right.
things are just one phone call away from, well, now these people are in the lead, right? It's not a race.
It just feels like we've been talking about it for forever. Like it's been going on for months already, and I keep on being asked about it, and there's like no real front runner, like you said. But it's just like it just never stops. Like, when are we getting an update on this? I think Roger Goodell kind of mentioned at the league meetings that we're still working through it. It's like, when is it going to happen? So, Apple has been brought up a lot, but I haven't really heard much since then.
Yeah, so I'd love to tell you it's going to be this, I'd love to break that story and tell you this is, but I really don't know for certain, right?
Yeah.
Those are the contenders, and I would list them probably. I don't think, I don't want to even say that because why even
Yeah.
say it? But those are the contenders.
It has been all over the map because I've seen reporting of front runners in the past several months,
Yep,
and then it just goes away. So it's probably safer for you not to do that.
exactly. It's
Um,
like what was it? What's the Kentucky Derby horse? Strike first or Hitch Strike?
Strike something. I'm
Strike
not a
or
horse
Hitch?
guy.
It's
Yeah,
like
something
that.
like that.
Maybe somebody's coming from the back and is gonna
Exactly.
come at the end with a huge bid, and they'll get it.
All right, so we'll definitely keep on keeping an eye on what happens over there. I'm sure you'll probably be the one who breaks it. All right, Andrew, I really want to thank you for coming on here. I feel like we covered a lot. Everyone can follow you on Twitter. It is at Andrew Marchand. Thank you so much for your time, and I think we'll definitely do it again soon.
Great, thank you.